Hi everyone! Welcome to the first lecture of ARCHLine.XP Advanced course, which will be about layer management. Let's get started. We will work on Andrea Nudge's project. When designing, a common task is to display the floor plan in different ways, as an architectural floor plan, a furniture floor plan, a mechanical or lighting plan. Programs offer a great solution to this problem, such as layer management. The idea of layer management is to group elements according to different aspects, so that we can create different versions of a floor plan within a single project. Our task will be to create different types of floor plan versions of this floor plan, and then to create a merged PDF of the final result. First, let's get to know the layers. The Layer Manager is located on the bottom status bar. It is divided into three parts. The first part on the left is the layer list, and on the right are the layer filters and layer variations. In the layer filters, clicking on all layers will display the ARCHLine default layers, or if we create our own layers, they will be included in this list. Under Used Layers, we will see the layers are working within a particular project. Now I'm going to work here under Used Layers to make it more transparent. We will look at the rest of the Layer Manager in more detail later in the video. Let's look at the properties of a layer. The first is the name, the second is the visibility, which can be turned on and off. When a layer is turned on, the lightboard icon is displayed in yellow. When it is turned off, it is displayed in gray. The next property is the lock. This can be locked or unlocked if a layer is visible. If it's locked, I can refer to this layer, but I can't select it, I can't edit it, and I can't generate its 3D model if it exists. However, if it's open, I can refer to it, select it, edit it, and generate it in 3D. Let's look at the other properties. Next, printability. If any layer is disabled here, it will not show up in the printout. We use this most consciously when, for example, we are working with auxiliary lines on a floor plan that we need to be able to edit it, but don't need to show up later when we print it. In this case, we disable the printability of the layer so that the printed PDF will no longer show these guides. The next property is the elements. It shows how many elements are placed on a layer. The last three properties are color, line type, and line weight. We will only see the effects of these if the layer control mode is active. If not, we can still change these properties, but the properties of these elements will not change. I will talk about the layer control mode later. Now let's see how we can select the layers. I can select them one by one clicking on them with the left mouse button or several at once by holding down the Control key. I can lock them all at once or even unlock them. I can also use the Shift key to select the first and the last layer of the group I want to select. I can then edit them all at once. If I only turn on the visibility of the layer, it will be still locked. However, if I unlock it first, the visibility of the layer will be unlocked. We also have another selection mode, where we can select all layers from the list at once. This can be achieved by pressing Ctrl A. Now let's get acquainted with the layer walk, which will be also found below. This allows us to switch layers on and off in the floor plan very quickly and easily. Here I can also select layers one by one in the same way or multiple layers using Ctrl or Shift. Or by holding down the left mouse button, I can also select multiple elements. First, I switch on the walls and slab layers, as I will be working with them. So I select the three layers and press OK to accept. To see this change in 3D, I need to rebuild the 3D model. There is another option. If I go back here, the layer walk, there is a refresh 3D option. If this is active, the program will automatically update the 3D model. For example, if I turn this interior hall decoration layer and press OK to accept, it automatically rebuilt the 3D model. In 2D and 3D view, the layer layout is not identical. I'll come back to this later to explain why. But it's also important to remember that when we're working with layers, always do it from the floor plan, so start the layer manager or the layer walk from here. Now, let's look at the practicalities of switching the layers on and off and locking them. So now I'm going to go back to the layer manager and I'm going to turn off the layer that just I turned on. And I'm going to lock the wall layers. In order to lock this wall layer, I need to make another layer active. I can do this by clicking on it and choosing to activate the layer. If a layer is active, I cannot disable, lock it, or change any of its other properties. So, we must always set another layer to active in this case. I lock wall layers, press OK to accept it, then rebuild the 3D model. This means I can't select and edit the walls and I can't generate the 3D view of them. But I can refer to it, for example, if I draw a line from the corner of this wall with the drawing tool, my mouse will be drawn there as well. Let's switch back to the Build 3D Model layer variation. I will talk more about the variations later. I rebuild the 3D model and switch to the whole 3 view. I activate the floor plan and go back to the layer manager. We have already talked about the properties of the layers, but not about how to place the elements on them. Elements are placed on layers in ARCHLine when they are created. Different sets are assigned to element types, and these are assigned to layers. For example, let's look at the properties of a wall. Here, one layered 30 wide wall is now selected, and this wall will be placed on a load-bearing layer. By default, this is how the program will build the wall for us. Let's take a look at one layered 6 wide wall. This will be placed on the wall partition wall layer. Let's take a look at the slab. This slab will be on the slab 1 layer. Let's move on to the interior design elements, and here we will look at an object, for example. Objects dragged in from the design center will default to the interior living room furnishing layer. Let's also look at the storage furniture. On the penultimate tab, we found the default layer, and this is interior kitchen furnishing. Since we can create not only a kitchen cabinet with KBB tool, but also a hallway cabinet, for example, so the default setting will not always be correct. We can work by setting up your objects layer before we place it on the floor plan, or we can do it later. To do this, we need to create new layers. We look at how to create new ones and place elements on them in a moment. But first, let's look at the layer control mode I mentioned earlier. This is found in the Edit menu, and as we can see, it is not active. Let's look at the properties of a drafting tool. An ARCHLine element has 5 common properties: the layer, the color, the line type, the line weight, and the draw order. We can set these properties, however, if the layer control mode is turned on, the layer will define them. This means that if I change the color or line type in the layer manager, the elements on that layer will be displayed with the same color and line weight. This is to provide AutoCAD compatible drawing mode in ARCHLine. So actually these are AutoCAD properties. I won't explain this any further. It will only be used by people who have worked in AutoCAD. We recommend that the properties of the elements should be defined by the general properties: color, line, weight, and line type. Let's go further and see why 2D and 3D views do not have the same layers. Let's open the layer walk. For now, I'm just going to switch on the interior layers and then use the Refresh 3D option to regenerate the 3D model. I go to the 3D window and open the layer walk here too. We can see that only these 5 layers are shown here. The 2D elements and their layers are included in the floor plan, but they won't appear here in 3D. Here we usually see a limited number of layers according to what we have selected on the floor plan and generated in 3D model. I will exit and go back to the floor plan and re-select Build 3D Model Layer Variation and of course rebuild the 3D model. From here, we will continue with the creation of new layers. I open the Layer Manager. As I mentioned at the very beginning, by selecting all layers, we can see the default layers and we can create a new one. Clicking on the Add button will create a new layer called Layer 1. Let's look at the default layers created by ARCHLine. We will also use this system. We will create 3 layers for one room, as we will be able to manage the elements more easily when rendering. But we already talked about this in the rendering workshop. I copy the name of interior hall decoration layer with Ctrl+C, then create the new layer. I paste the name and rewrite as furnishing. As I said, we are going to create 3 layers per room, so we need one more, the lighting. I will also create the same for the office. So I copy the name again and change it to lighting on the new layer. Then again, this will be furnishing. Let's look at how we can move the elements to these new layers. I'll go to the floor plan and we'll see what kind of layers this furniture is currently on. We have almost all elements on the interior living room furnishing layer, so I'm going to activate only this layer in the layer walk window. This way, we can immediately see the elements that we need to move to the corresponding layers that we created. I'm going to inactivate the Refresh 3D option now, and then I press OK to accept it. I can move the elements to the created layers very easily by selecting them and choosing the layer in the layer list. This will be the interior office furnishing. I select these ones and move it to the interior hall furnishing layer. Let's check what we've done. I'll turn on these 2 layers and see if everything has moved. Let's switch back to the Build 3D Model Layer Variation. We will continue to work in this. Let's open the Layer Manager again. As I mentioned before, in this project, we have not only created the layers for furniture in the 2 rooms, but also other layers, such as the false ceiling. Other dimensions, such as interior or false ceiling and wall plasterboard dimensions, which we will need in order to be able to prepare the necessary design documentation at the end of the presentation. We have the option to delete layers that do not have elements on them. We can click on the layer and then click on the delete button. But we also have the option of deleting the ones that do not have elements on them. To do this, we need to select the Also Delete Used Layer option at the bottom. By default, the Do Not Delete Used Layer option is set. Because we have to be very careful with this. If we delete something by mistake, we will not be able to undo it here. So I recommend not changing this setting. Now let's move on to the layer variations and filters. For the filters, I already mentioned that we have the All Layers and Used Layers filters, but we can create our own group. I can create separate group for the interior layers by clicking on the plus button and then renaming this group to Interior. I go back to the Used Layers and while holding Shift, I select interior ones and drag them into the group. we can see that 7 layers have been added. These groups are very useful because they allow us to lock and unlock the layers at the same time. When I click on the name of the group, I can turn on them and off, or lock and unlock. So this is a very handy option. Now let's look at the layer variations. I have already created some of them. Here are the variations I already used for the Build 3D model that I have also created one for the tiling plan, the electrical accessories plan, the MEP plan, and the architectural floor plan. We will need 2 more variations. One will be the furnishing plan and the other will be the ceiling plan. I'll show you what kind of documentation we need to prepare. So here the architectural floor plan, this is the furnishing plan that we are going to do. The MEP plan is already done. We are going to do the false ceiling plan as well. And the electrical accessories plan and the tiling plan is already done. Let's go back and see how we can make our own layer variation. We are able to create a layer variation by clicking on the plus button. There are 2 ways to do this. The first is to start from all layers and uncheck the layers that we do not want to display. The second is to start from an existing variation and change the visibility of the layers here. I'm going to start from here, from the Build 3D model variation, and click on the plus button to create the new one. This variation will inherit the layer properties that were in the Build 3D model variation, and we will modify them. With the right mouse button, I will rename this variation. This will be the furnishing plan. Let's see what kind of layers I need to include. I need to switch on the furniture, the dimensioned interior, and the raster image because I also want to make a colored furnishing plan. With the option Show Visible Layers Only, we can filter out the layers that are visible. This helps to work more transparent. Now I'll switch off the ones I don't need. That's the interior, living room furnishing, and the false ceiling. I can filter continuously over time to see the current visible layers. I have to turn off the office decoration and the lighting too. Finally, I just need to turn off the molding and I'm done. Now I'm going to update to this layer variation with the update icon. If we now look at the Build 3D model and the furnishing plan variations, we can see that they are completely different. Let's also create another variation for the ceiling plan. I'm going to make it the same way. I click on the plus button and rename it. I click on it and unlock and lock the necessary layers in the same way. I'm going to turn off all furnishings and the molding. I'll update and it's done. So again, we have a different variation. Let's see how we can switch between the variations on the floor plan. I already shown this is where we'll find the layer variation filter, and this is where we can click through the access the different plans. This will be the furnishing plan that we just created. Now we can start creating the plan sheets. I will access it from the project navigator. I've already prepared them, so I'm just going to open it and we'll keep working with it. I'm going to make 6 plan sheets as I showed you earlier in the linked PDF. On the first will be the architectural floor plan. On the second will be the furnishing plan, followed by MEP plan, the ceiling plan, the electrical plan, and the tiling plan. These are already prepared, so I have to place the furnishing and the ceiling plan on them. To do this, I go back to the floor plan and select the furnishing layer variation. Then go back to the print sheet, and from the project navigator, I drag the ground floor onto the second plan sheet and place it at a scale of 1:50. I'm going to place it twice, because as I said, I will display the colored layout plan as well. I will place it here and then use the offset command to cut off the unnecessary parts. Then I'll drag the floor plan from the project navigator again and place it at 1 to 50. I also choose the offset command and now cut the other side. I place it on the plan sheet. This completes the plan sheet for the furnishing layout. Now, I would like to move to the ceiling plan here, so I'm going to go back to the floor plan and select the ceiling plan layer variation. Then, drag the floor plan from the project navigator onto the plan sheet and place it at 1 to 50. So we can see that whichever layer variation is active on the floor plan, I will be able to place that on the plan sheet. Now, let's look at the layers on the print sheet. The layer set of the drawing on the print sheet will determine what we see on the print sheet. Let's look at what I mean by this. Click on the drawing. This is a group, and in the group properties, let's look at the layers. We can see that this is an architectural floor plan and only the architectural elements that are active on the floor plan are turned on. Here we can see this group has inherited the layers that we had set up on the floor plan. If I switch to a different layer variation on the floor plan, for example the furnishing plan, the status of the layers will not change on the drawing. It is important to note that there is also a layer set for the print sheet. If we go to the Layer Manager and look for used layers, we will find them here. Also important, as I mentioned before, is that this column is responsible for printability. Always make sure that this is turned on for all used layers, because it's not, they won't show up in the print. As I mentioned, turning off printability can actually be interesting when working with edit lines. Let's look at an example. Let's turn off the printability of the furnishing layers, the ones for the office, the kitchen and the hall. Here, the furniture is still visible on the furnishing plan, but if I select Document, Print, PDF and print this plan sheet, it is already clear from the preview that this furniture will not be visible after printing because we have turned off the printability. I'm not going to print out now. I'm going to reset the printability. Finally, I create a merged PDF using the documentation print queue command. By clicking on the plus button, I can insert another page in the print queue. This will be the planned documents print sheet I created. So that's what I'm going to insert here. In this case, we need to set the properties one of the plan sheets. I set the size to A3, choose landscape format, set the aspect ratio to 1:1 and center the plot. I click on the Apply button and the program will automatically set the other plan sheets based on these settings and list them here. Here we can see the names of the plan sheets, so we can easily sort them in order. We can use the arrows to change the order. In the path, I'll choose where I want to save it and name it, let it be Documents. If we are creating a merged PDF, we must enable the Combine into a single PDF file option. Clicking Print will create the file. We can navigate in the same way as in any other multi-page PDF. Let's go back to the program and see how we can create our own set of layers and how we can save the layer system we have created and make it default and use it in other new projects. I open the Layer Manager to see the layers we have created. We've created new layers for the hall, the office. We have also created some for interior dimensions and for the ceiling in this project. We can save these by making them default. We can also do this by clicking on the Settings, then the Open and Save menu. In Managing Styles, I need to select and apply Save Current Settings for New Projects option. I only activate the layer structure, then click OK to accept it. The program warns us that the settings will be valid only after restarting the program. So I restart it. I open a new project, then the Layer Manager. we can see that here are the layers that we have saved. So now every time we open a new project, these layers will also appear by default. So we can work with our own layers immediately and we don't need to create them every time. The only downside this is that we can only save one of these settings. This brings us to the end of today's workshop, which I hope has been useful for you. I look forward to seeing you at the next workshop. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.